Welcome to another recording of the 6.5 Virtual Podcast. My name is Matt Kimball, Vice President and Principal Analyst with More Insights and Strategy, and I am here with Russell Rice, Director of Product Management at Cisco. And today we are here to talk about AI networking simplified, taking a look inside Cisco's Nexus Hyperfabric AI. Hey, Russell, thanks for joining the podcast with me, and thanks for taking a few minutes to have a chat here.
Love to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, let's have a fun time. So let me set up the problem statement here, okay? Kind of get things going and start our conversation. So as we think about AI in the enterprise and kind of moving from pilot or proof of concept to production, we start talking about scale, right? We go from a few GPUs and a few servers to hundreds to even thousands of GPUs. And we go from small workloads to large data management platforms like VAST, trying to feed all of these B300 GPUs from NVIDIA. And it gets really complex trying to connect A to B. And really the most important part of this is that connective tissue that can take all of that data and feed those GPUs quickly. But it's hard, right? I mean, I'm sure being at Cisco, you've heard this a lot from customers. So as you kind of look at what's going on out there in the AI space, and you think about companies wanting to really kind of embrace AI at the enterprise level, we know their infrastructure really can't keep up. What are you hearing? I mean, what do you see out there? And does when we talk about hyperfabric AI, is that really the answer that enterprise customers seem to be looking for?
Yeah, no, good question. I will offer, AI is definitely a challenging thing we see for a lot of organizations to really absorb. Obviously when you hit organizations that are at the hyperscaler and several in the neocloud at this point, they've kind of figured out the operational side and how to organize around it and addressing scale. But as we move into general enterprise, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed and thought through. They're quite different. And I'd offer one of the fascinating things about AI is, as you consider scale, is two vectors that it becomes complex to grapple with. One is just the technological side, right? Hyperfabric is a new offer from Cisco. We're trying to make things simpler here. And even if you just go to kind of the maximum size of an enterprise reference architecture of NVIDIA, which they pump out and which we're compliant with, you're dealing with interconnecting 1,000 GPUs, for example. And I don't know if you've stepped back and kind of actually looked at what the infrastructure footprint needs to be for 1,000 GPU environment, but you're dealing with scores and scores of switches. You're dealing with front end, back end, storage management networks. You're dealing with a servers arrays with that number of GPUs on them. You're dealing with storage infrastructure that deals with large petabytes of data. And even just from a physical wiring perspective, you're probably dealing with over 1,000 optical cables, right? So if you just step back and think about what that looks like from a new build perspective, that's very different than let's wire in 2 servers and go. Right. And so kind of understanding what that means early on so that you don't misset your expectations and you make sure that you've got a path from kind of initial absorption to where I want to go is an area that, any assistance can help a lot. And that's one of the areas that really makes this challenging. I'd say on the other spectrum that you run into, it's also get into the parts of the organization that it actually touches. AI is not generally just owned by one team. In order for technology to be absorbed by the enterprise and be really widely used, what you really run into is cross-marrying, the classic networking term, server teams, server operation teams. You've also got AI and AI operations teams. You've got software management teams for software lifecycle management. You also have security that ties into a lot of this AI stuff too. And they're all forming together in this new space they haven't worked together on as well for brownfield deployments. And the other interesting thing that you start getting into here, which is a bit more of a unique vector AI is bringing in, is all of the facilities side. Because of the power draw and kind of the real physicality of this thing, it also has an implication to the facilities. And so how can you kind of look at all of that in an efficient way where at the end of the day, the speed with which kind of from first decision, I want to go down this path to I better be operational to get the advantage and the financial return that I'm looking at for my initial investment out in time before I'm obsolete, which tends to be running on kind of 3-4 year cycles. That compressed stuff makes both of those vectors hard. And so that's, this is different than what we've run before. This is why AI is a bit more challenging than I think things we've had to deal with historically. And so it's kind of exciting and both challenging in both regards.
It's funny, because I worked in IT in a previous life, and when you talked about power budgets back when I was in IT, it was almost laughable. It was owned by facilities or operations, and it was something IT net folks never thought of, right? And it's just to what you're saying, it's one of those vectors that really it really changes the game when you think about AI. And you're right, it's truly kind of an enterprise. Everybody is a stakeholder at this point.
Yeah.
But you talk about this, and quite frankly, I hear hyperfabric sometimes. But a lot of folks hear AI infrastructure and fabric, and the mind immediately goes to what the huge cloud providers are doing with all of these GPUs, and it's super complex, super expensive in their heads, right? And really difficult to scale, right? What is it about hyperfabric AI that kind of makes this easier for those IT teams, those folks that are out there and trying to lay out infrastructure to enable these agentic AI enterprises to really excel?
I think what I'd offer that we took a different view on this than I think is normal for products in this space is we step back and try to say, okay, let's rethink the goalposts of what we become responsible for as part of our solution design, and I mean kind of what we bring to the table and where we start in the process. And so in our early investigations with talking to organizations about absorption, I'll just share with you. And I wanted to talk about kind of network and scaling and characteristics like that because, hey, I'm Cisco and, I'm responsible for the networking, new cloud managed network solution that's easy. And the first meeting I had was somebody who went back to what I was telling you before. Hey, let's talk physical cabling because if there's 1,000 cables, I need help there because my project could take me 5 months before I've even got everything procured, racked, stacked, and up and running. And I've
Right.
already lost a large part of my budget. And so what we realized there is we need to start as a technology provider and think much earlier in the cycle and think through the entire life cycle of what it means for AI to embark upon. And so what we did a different tack there. When your first interaction with our solution, you're actually starting at a conceptual design level before you buy anything. You're
Mhm.
basically trying to say, what kind of capacity do I need? What type of infrastructure designs does it serve? What kind of a GPU array do I actually require? What kind of storage infrastructure do I need? How do I wire and bring all this together? What type of power envelope does this whole thing require for me to do it? What security surroundings do I want around that? And I still haven't bought anything. How can I make that design part of my process and automatically feed into the next pieces of what I need? Like, okay, if I like this, can I make sure all the teams involved, the software team responsible for the AI software, do they know what they're getting? The team that's doing network management, do they know what they're getting for the network side? The
Yep.
team that's responsible for the servers, do they know what they're getting? Does everybody look at the same design, have an understanding of what's encompassed? And then can you take the next step? Can you make sure what you've conceptualized and all agreed upon, you actually procure easily, quickly, with all the right parts, without an error?
Yep.
Having been involved with, passing spreadsheets back and forth with crews, trying to make sure all the optics for 1,000 different cables across all of my different wiring diagrams are right. It's really freaking hard,
Yep.
right? If you can automate that as part of your life cycle, so come from a design, build bombs, build right cabling plans to once you receive kit, how do you automatically just plug it in? It's automatically provisioned the way your design said it should go so that there's no work going from deployment from original design intent. That's the life cycle we focus really heavily on. It's bringing the entire process closer, not just the networking side or can I get enough GPUs, but what's the life cycle from concept into operation? And that's where we focused. And it's not that people don't do that today. It's that how can I remove the likelihood of error and the elbow grease effort involved to get there? Can I shrink that whole thing?
Yeah, I like that. It's if you think about critical path and any project, right? It's about shortening that critical path and really accelerating that time to first token, which and it speaks to outcome focus instead of just kind of pure technology focus. And I like that approach. It's like you're working with customers to help them achieve kind of where they're trying to get to, and then to me that is really kind of I think more companies should be kind of focused on.
I'll give you an anecdote, by the way. One interesting thing that happened as part of this. We're very kind of customer centric in the way we built this out.
Mhm.
I told you that story about a person saying, "Let's talk about layer one, and kind of how do I just build this stuff out." We ended up embarking upon and have realized a whole new part of the what's the helping hands thing that I can give somebody. We call it on-site when you're actually got your equipment. Like it's what's the procedural map for what I need to do to rack it up, to cable it up, and to make sure in real time it's right.
Yeah.
So, we include that as part of the process, and that's not normally what you think about as a network vendor or an AI vendor, but it's an important part of this process, just make everything's easier.
Yeah, yeah, I think that, and it's anecdotally, I can speak to this as well. Every IT person I speak to, whether they're IT administrators, network administrators, or CIOs, it's the common theme is we need help. This thing is really complex, and you're right. It's not just we need help from a network administrator to do network, or a network company to do network related stuff, and then a storage company to do storage. It is we need someone to help us remove all of this friction. Hey, so you just made. Correct me if I'm wrong. I heard you just made Hyperfabric AI Orderable. Is that correct?
I am very excited to say we made AI Hyperfabric orderable. It happened this month. Tremendous, excitement on our side. I will say, as a proud product owner, I'll share with you that we started this project about 2.5 years ago. We released Hyperfabric 7 months ago, and now we made the AI variant, of orderable. Now that's pretty freaking fast. So we're going to
Yeah.
start up speed here at Cisco to make this all possible, and we're really proud right now. Just to share, we're actually, as part of orderability, we're actually rounding out our betas right now. So Cisco's finished its own beta. It's rolling production live as I speak. I've got several other betas that are rolling out right now that are this week, monumentous stuff like finishing it all up and verifying is going on. So it's dang exciting. I'm
Right.
expecting and hoping to light this whole thing up within the next 4 weeks or so, actually 3 to 4 weeks, and kind of allow anybody to come in and have some fun with this stuff. I think they'll be excited about it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So tie all this together for me, okay? So we're talking about Hyperfabric AI. We're talking about the way you're engaging with customers to deploy infrastructure and really simplify the process of connecting all of these different points at scale. But now we get it deployed. We're at day 2, and we're talking operations, right? Or actually, let's not even go there. Let's stay at day 0 first and
Yeah.
get to day 2. How are you seeing? I think you talked a lot about kind of simplifying the process of deployment, but in terms of like cost, simplicity, kind of, time saved, are you, from the early feedback you've received from betas, or, kind of, what you've seen in general, are you seeing kind of, a lot of benefit to customers when you talk about network and infrastructure kind of being managed as like this single cloud-based system? Or is that just pie in the sky talking? I mean, a lot of vendors claim it. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, one of the things I'll call out is first is yes, we've got some, obviously early but demonstrable feedback about how much this saves, and there's two big accesses for it. Because at the end of the day, you use the phrase time to first token. I mean, that's what it's all about. And so every step that reduces that is important. Early feedback we're getting right now is the amount of time physically involved to get this stuff rolling is like a tenth, an order of magnitude difference. And
Wow.
the amount of calendar time expressed. We want to talk to an organization who spent months getting their first AI deployments out with our solution, weeks. So that's a different unit of measure,
Yeah.
and we think we can press that. That's first touch, and so the whole point of that is speed and velocity. But I think an underpinning kind of question like how does that materially save, other than maybe you've just done it before, so you can do it faster or something like that. Just skills grow. I think in addition to that life cycle approach that I was describing before, one of the foundational things that we've done differently, and it's really on the networking side that becomes a bit different, is our whole goal with Hyperfabric is to make the customer experience of Hyperfabric of the entire network feel as if all you're doing is managing one big switch.
Yeah.
And whether or not you've got 10 switches, you've got a complex front end, back end storage management network of 1,000 switches, I don't care, because I'm trying to present that as simplistically to you as possible,
Yeah.
so that you don't have to understand as a customer the interpinnings nor be responsible for the provisioning and the ongoing operations of what makes that fabric a fabric.
Yeah.
Instead, you just want to make sure it's providing connectivity to your GPUs and it's fast and working. Right? It's providing connectivity to your storage and making sure your storage can talk, to the GPUs, and it's fast and working. That's what you care about. All that muck in the middle, I want to go to my cloud experience. Cloud ergonomics is generally, I don't understand the plumbing. I just care about my apps working. And what we've done is we've built that knowledge, that approach in Hyperfabric. Analogy I like to give is, AI for people, you don't want to have to build your own car and understand your engine and suspension, all that. What you actually just want to do is drive. And so we've tried to make it so you drive, but that also means that you have to rely on us, that we built the engine that'll work for you, that we've got the suspension that will work for you. And so, there's obviously going to be some constraints around it, but we let you drive.
Well, just like buying a, I don't know if you're in my age range, but just like buying a car 30 years ago versus today, you used to worry about, how many cylinders, and you worried about all of the different elements of the engine. And today it's a totally different buying experience. And that is how technology adoption has evolved in the enterprise as well, especially with a new demographic kind of coming in and pushing us old guys out, right? It's an important factor, and I like what you're saying there. A lot of folks reference that infamous MIT study from a few months ago that 5% of AI proof of concepts don't show a measurable ROI. Right? You're talking directly to the heart of what is preventing that ROI from being recognized in a reasonable time frame. Right? So it's a great story you're telling. But as we're talking through this, let's kind of drive this to the bigger picture, right? So AI infrastructure is becoming more plug and play thanks to companies like Cisco and the way you partner with, the NVIDIAs of the world, which is very complex on one side, and the VASTs of the world, which is very complex on the other side. You are the easy button or the easy fabric that's tying that all together. So as you think about that and you think about kind of what you hear from IT leaders, IT practitioners, what do you think are like the mind shift or the mindsets that have to shift a little bit, or the perspectives that have to shift a little bit to help them stay ahead and kind of like really be proactive in driving AI throughout the enterprise instead of reactive to all the problems that are going to kind of inevitably pop up?
Yeah, no, I think what we're really going to be discussing here is kind of what's the evolution of the problem you're trying to solve, from first contact to kind of next steps. And I think where a lot of companies at the beginning of their journey that we're talking to are, many of them are still at is there a financially viable model that I can, actually operate myself that will work, right? Is the money in it? Can I do it myself? Honestly, a fair number of people are still at that wedge point. I think right beyond that is what we were talking about. Like, people who understand that and realize it's possible and feasible and economically viable is interesting, and it actually can be compelling for some. The next step is what we were discussing. How quickly can I do this to speed it up to really, gain a lot of benefit more, and stay on the life cycles fast? Those are the first two steps. I would offer that the next big arc that we're going to be running into, that you already see in people who are quite mature in this area, is it's much more about scaling and agility.
Yeah.
Right. This is about the ability, to your earliest point, like, how do I start with a certain investment footprint, whatever it might be, and then grow it where it's working and need to be. And that's where this becomes important. And part of that gets to be the question of, can I reuse what I purchased before and incrementally make changes, whether growing or changing some of the componentry, rather than rebuild from scratch a new thing, which you don't always want to go do. Don't burn down one house to build another house. But the other area that you get into is not just the reuse of the componentry, but how do I make sure that, as my learnings or needs of this AI changes from a business application side, I can reuse the infrastructure that I've got and invested in and start sharing it for different business purposes, and it still all seamlessly works well. And that gets to things like security layer and monitoring and set partitioning and those kinds of things out, and DevOps automation. Right? How do I start automating this to make it easy for me to do this, and whether that's orchestration of workloads and AI loads and all the apparatus around that, which ties in the networking infrastructure as well as the server. That whole thing, now you start to say, how do I apply a tight DevOps model around that? That's where the next kind of areas tend to go. And I think you'll see, the hyperscalers were already there. That's what they do. And I think
Yeah.
your enterprise is going to be following that same footstep.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I would say, a couple of things I hear out there is I hear a lot of almost irrational enthusiasm from folks around AI and what it's going to do and what it's not going to do. And sometimes it feels like AI is the hammer and everything looks like a nail. It's the old expression. And I think you said this at the outset. I think if you think about outcome focused and what you're trying to achieve to start, and that's at the end, and work left from there. Work backwards from there. Everything should dovetail from that kind of what those desired outcomes are meant to be. And I always try to adhere to the principle of keeping it simple, right? The whole engineering, KISS philosophy, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And it's easier said than done, and AI is very complex. But when you look at what you're doing, Cisco is doing with Hyperfabric AI, that's kind of like applying technology to that principle to really drive that simplicity across the organization. So I love what y'all are doing. And I'm sure it's gonna do amazingly well as you go into production. Before we close out, any last thoughts you want to kind of leave us with?
No, I'm just, for those taking a look at this video, I just offer, this is, I think it's an exciting time for AI. It's definitely, I was working with a compatriot who said, at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do and needs to happen is the democratization of AI. And
Yeah,
that really is not just from an individual using it, but the ability to actually host it and manage it yourself. And that's really the journey we're all on right now, to make it so that's possible. And so it's exciting. And, the phone went through that journey, and look what we've got right now. So
right,
AI
right.
there too.
That's actually it's a great analogy, and kind of like the automobile, the phone. It's a continual evolution, and yeah, really great words to end on. Russell, thank you for taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. And for those that are out there, please take the time and check out what Cisco is doing with Hyperfabric AI. It's a great story, and it really does drive out the complexity and drive down that time to first token. So thank you for taking the time, and hopefully we get to do this again in the near future and talk about the great successes you've had.